Hello and welcome to the Infinite Financial Freedom Podcast, where we empower you with financial literacy and guide you on your journey to financial freedom. I'm Josh Mettle, and I'm here today with Casey Franchini, founder of Brick by Brick Wealth. Casey is an entrepreneur, a real estate investor, mother of three, wife to one. That's an assumption on my part, but I think that's accurate. And she's amazingly determined to teach others how to create wealth and cash flow. So we have a lot in common. I'm excited for this interview. Casey's passion for real estate has gone back over 15 years, where she began in California as a real estate broker. She began finding killer investment deals for SoCal flippers. And Casey and her family now reside in Memphis. I'm guessing there's a little more cash flow in properties in Memphis than SoCal. I'm sure we'll get into that. Where she's actively building Brick by Brick Wealth, which is her coaching company. Also, you can find her at her website, brickbybrickwealth.com, and her real estate. And she's also building her own personal real estate empire. So this is really cool when we get to interview someone who's a real estate pro, a coach, and someone doing it for themselves. So Casey, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you so much, Josh. I am so excited to be here today.
Yeah, it's going to be a blast. And I have a ton of questions for you. But let's kind of just do a little background before we jump in. Tell us a little bit about how you got started actually buying properties and how that has evolved into what you've built today. Give us a little bit of the background story.
So I first became, I've been in love with just houses in general, just my whole life. I grew up with my dad. My dad bought a crack house, literally. There were needles in the walls, and the previous owners had like 8 Doberman Pinschers lived in the backyard because they would deal out of the house. So he bought on a VA loan, high interest rate in the 90s, cinder block house, like for bulletproof reasons. I mean, we bought a fixer. My dad fixed it up for 10 years. So I learned a lot about fixing houses. I didn't like it at the time, but I'm so glad that I know now. So it just kind of sparked my love for houses in general. And just for fun on my own time, I would go visit open houses all around. So at the time I lived in California, and in the early 2000s, late 90s is when there's a lot of new builds. Mm-hmm. So I would travel within 2 hours and go look at all the new builds, sometimes more than one time, just because I loved seeing houses. Every open house, I would stop and was like, I don't want to look at another open house. Too bad. I want to go see inside. So that love transitioned to me after college, getting my real estate license. And I had a real job for a little bit, but that's another story. Realized I didn't want to drive an hour and a half back and forth every day to work. I wanted to be a mom one day and have kids. And I knew that I didn't want to come home at 8 o'clock at night. So I said, well, I love houses. I'm going to be a real estate agent. But I looked like I was 12. I was young. I looked really young, and no one wanted me to list their $1 million house when I looked like I was 14 years old, even though I was not 14. So I found my niche with real estate investors, and they didn't care if I was green from Mars as long as I found them a deal. And since they were looking for flips and they didn't want to spend their gas to drive, I would spend my gas to drive all around California, SoCal, the desert, Los Angeles, the beach, and I would find properties that needed rehab. And I knew how to estimate that because of working with my dad. So that was great until my husband and I realized that we can't afford to live in California, So we moved out to Memphis. He got a great job opportunity. And that's when I said, okay, I'm tired of being a real estate agent and driving around. I don't ever want to do that again, but let's buy some rental properties. And that was still foreign to me. I knew everything, but when it's your own money, you're putting it into something. And I was, and I moved out here, and then I was just a stay-at-home mom. I didn't do real estate. I said, okay, we have to really make sure we're making smart decisions here in what we're buying because we can't make mistakes. So that's when we got started buying rental properties.
I love it. So what got you from, first of all, actually, I want to go back to something the previous said about your dad using his VA to purchase that home. I mean, I personally believe that our veterans have one of the most insane opportunities to become wealthy real estate investors over a long period of time because they have this loan vehicle that they can 100% finance. A lot of them get subsidies, right, from the military to live off base to help pay for the cost of the house. A couple years go by, you refinance that to a conventional loan, and then go buy another property, 100% financing with VA. Like, Do you know any better tool on God's green earth to accumulate your first couple rental properties than that?
No, it's a great idea. And if we didn't already move with kids, we would have done a house hacking, kind of thing similar to that.
Yeah.
But we already had 2 kids moving out here. So I was like, well, I want my house with the pool. Is the only way you're getting me out of California into Memphis is if I get a pool. So we bought our primary. But I mean, house hacking, whether it be with a VA loan or FHA loan, is one of the best ways people can get started investing with little down.
Yep, absolutely. So you veterans out there listening, follow Casey, follow her wisdom. You have a extraordinary tool in your tool belt that you may not even know. Okay. So the question I had for you was, you started working with these real estate investors in California that were doing flipping, but somewhere along the line, you decided that flipping wasn't the game you wanted to play. You wanted to create passive income and cash flow. So how did that come about, and why didn't you follow that flipping mentality?
Because now my dad and I were going to flip a house together. And this was when I was still a cocktail waitress at a bar and during stated income times. And so we were going to flip a $750,000 house in Orange County. And I just went to the bank and said, I make X. I said whatever I needed to say that I made to get a loan. And they gave me the loan. And we didn't end up, I'm going through the house. I had a big roof issue or something. But it was then that I realized, this flipping is a lot of work. And I knew this from the investor guys and from working with my dad. And I don't want to make active income. I love jobs. I'm not done working. I was barely started working, but I knew that I wanted to create passive income because I wanted to, and especially when I moved to Memphis with my husband, Blake, I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom still. I didn't want to give that up. I wanted to be able to show up for my kids' baseball games and take them ice skating and be room mom and be there for all their practices and not just be the parent that drops off. Nothing wrong with that, but I wanted to be there for them. Like I didn't want my kids to go to daycare, but I also wanted to still be able to financially contribute to the household. And I couldn't do that if I didn't work. So how can I make money and not work? I was like, well, I don't have a lot of options. I thought I'm not good at anything. And everyone's like, well, we could buy rent, Blake was like, we could buy rental properties. And I'm like, yeah, I know I've been saying that, but that's going to take too long. And he's like, well, we don't even have money for a rental, Casey. Like, so we just bought this fixer upper in Memphis. So if you want to buy rentals, you're going to have to figure out how to pay for one. And I'm like, but I just have a newborn and a 2-year-old. What could I do? I don't want to go to work. I don't want to get Starbucks or something. So I started a little Etsy shop and I made handmade things from home and sold them online. In about a year and a half, I saved up enough money for a down payment. We saved about $20,000 doing that.
Awesome.
And yeah, so from there, we started buying long-term rental properties. And I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I knew that if we at least had 10 rentals and they were paid off and they each made $1,000 a month, I'd have $100,000 a year, and that could cover my husband's income. And, we could be work optional or at least take some stress off of his shoulders as being the sole provider.
You'd be out of the rat race, as Robert Kiyosaki says, right?
Yes, exactly.
It's interesting. I was telling you, as we kicked off here, that Robert was a key mentor for me, and in his book Rich Dad Poor Dad, where he creates the cash flow quadrant, right? He talks about all the values and the reasons why you want to get into that entrepreneur investor quadrants of the cash flow quadrant. And so for me, having kind of got my introduction into real estate a little bit through my family, but then really formalized through Robert's teaching, I realized that flipping wasn't part of his formula. His formula was cash flow, and it was depreciation, and it was tax efficiency. So that's great, and it's worked out really successfully for you. So congratulations, and just congratulations on your persistence. I want to point something out to everybody. She didn't really have anything going in her favor. Right? She didn't have the money. She had a new baby. She's in a new town. Like there's more headwinds than tailwinds in Casey's situation there. But she said, okay, a lot of stuff I can't control. What can I control? Well, I can control an Etsy business from home. I can save and live below my means. And then I can use that as my leverage point into my first vehicle. Or my first investment vehicle. So I just point that out, Casey, because a lot of people look at all the things that they can't control, all the things that are going against them. And that oftentimes distracts them from what they can control. So great job. Congratulations on that. Do you still do Etsy?
No, I quit my Etsy a couple years ago when I started my coaching business. I transformed this from my craft room to my real estate room.
To your
And all my
office.
craft stuff is organized in the closet.
I love it. I love it. All right. So the number one thing that I'm hearing from, people right now, friends, family, people that are interested in buying homes, is that there's really a lot of fear out there. CNBC tells us that we're in a real estate bubble bigger than 2006, and it's about to implode. And I'm just curious, as an investor, how are you looking at the real estate market, and are you seeing fear or opportunity out there?
I think there are two different markets. There is the above the median market, and there is the below the median market. And I think they're doing different things. They're changing, not at the same rate. People that are buying, depending upon your area, a luxury home might be $1 million or might be 400, like it just depends. But let's just say, if you're buying a property to live in, you're moving up, you're the move up buyer, and you're buying $1 million home, those houses in those areas are going to fall much faster. They're going to, $100,000 decrease. Okay. You're not going to see that in a house that's $200,000. It's not going to get cut in half. In that entry level market, the brand new, the cheap stuff where everyone's buying rentals, the things that cash flow, there's not a huge decline in property values. It's slow. It's tiny. It's 10,000, 20, maybe that's the most, 20%, 25% drop of $100,000 house is not a 25% drop of $1 million house. It's completely different. And I also want to point out that the entry level market there, there are not enough properties. Okay. There is still not enough properties. I work with students all across the country in many different markets across the country. There are markets that are still over asking all cash with several offers.
Yep.
This is not, like I said, two completely different markets. Expensive, I'm going to go live in it market. And then I'm going to rent it out this potential cash flow neighborhood city market. They're just different. And when you're thinking rental properties, long-term investment, if you're thinking flips, or you're thinking, I'm going to buy an Airbnb maybe, or whatever. Okay, different strategies for different folks. But if you're looking at long-term rentals, really, and this is what I tell my students and potential students, or really anybody, it doesn't really matter what's happening right now with prices, like IDGAF. Why? Because I'm not going to go sell it tomorrow. If we look at the market crash of 2008, which I remember, I was a real estate agent then in California, and everyone was crying, literally crying, because their house dropped in value by half, and they had a subprime loan that couldn't afford anyways, and now they're underwater making this huge mortgage payment. They might as well foreclose, right? Since then, everybody can afford their houses because the banks are like, we don't want to go out of business, like Countrywide or whatever. I was like, I remember that. So what are we going to do? Make sure everybody can afford their freaking home. No. So now there's all these requirements and qualifications. So we're not in that sort of issue with subprime lending with that part of the housing market crash. Yeah. Right now, we are in a recession, which is a bit different. And there's other things at play. But for the entry level property that counts as, that could be an income producing, cash flowing long-term rental, there are still plenty of people that are paying whatever they need to pay to get into that. Now, I will say the plus for right now, it being more of a buyer's market, is that those poor little FHA and VA buyers now have a little chance. They got a shot because they didn't have diddly squat of a shot the past 12, 18 months because you were getting outbid by all cash investors every single day. There's a lot of investors that are sitting on the sidelines right now because they are babies. They're whiny little babies because their rates aren't 4% anymore. And they're going to sit at home and pout until rates go down. So boo-hoo on them. Yay for people like me and my students who don't care, because we are buying in good neighborhoods that have, appreciation potential. Of course, we're not buying in D-class crappy neighborhoods, but the areas that we're buying in, they are appreciating neighborhoods, and they cash flow. They cash flow at today's rate of 6.75% for an investor loan. They will cash flow at 7.5% interest. So guess what? I don't care about. I don't care about pouting and sitting on the sidelines waiting for a rate to go down. Because if you look at history over the past 50 years, the average interest rate has been 7.5%. So we are still under the historic average for interest rates. We should be so happy right now you can get a house under 7%. If you have bad credit or not as great, maybe close to 8%, or DSCR loan, 8 to 12% or 10 for interest rate. Okay. But for a regular conforming investor loan, rates are still good. And guess what you can get right now by making offers, especially in the wintertime? You can get motivated sellers who have to freaking sell their house. And you're not getting the boohoo, pouty, newbie investors that are whining that they're not getting their interest rate. So they're going to wait. Well, great. You guys just wait while I get to have the seller give me concessions, offer below ask and get it accepted, and have them fix stuff.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's just night and day from right now, from, a few months ago, last summer, before the interest rates drop. It's been night and day. So I am not waiting to buy. My students are not waiting to buy. Now is the time to buy because the rates are still pretty good. You can still cash flow. I'm not realizing any loss because I'm not selling anytime soon.
Casey, you're so spot on.
It gets me fired up.
I love it. I love it. And you're exactly right. I tell people all the time, I say, you zoom out, think about this a little bit. A year ago, I could, you could go out and get a 3% interest rate if you were on an owner occupied. Maybe you're paying 4% if it was an investment property, but you had to pay $20,000 to $50,000 over ask price. So I saw some people pay $250,000 over ask price. You had to waive your appraisal. So you really didn't know what the value of the property was. Many times you had your earnest money go hard from day one. So you couldn't do thorough due diligence. You were basically just in. And there was no way you were going to get a seller to give you any sort of concession to fix anything or repair anything. You were literally just closing your eyes and taking a jump and hoping it would all work out okay. And in response for that, or the offset for that, was the 3 or 4% mortgage rate. So fast forward today, you can negotiate the price. You can negotiate seller paid closing costs, which you can use to buy down your rate. You can negotiate longer terms. You can negotiate, hey, I want to write an offer, but wait for me to sell my house. Give me 15 days to inspect. Give me 45 to close. I mean, you've got all this, the ability to structure a deal so much better. And the only thing that you don't have in your favor is you have a 6% or a 7% rate instead of a 3% or a 4% rate. But guess what? Mortgage rates follow inflation. And what is inflation doing? Inflation is going down. So there's a really high probability that in 12 to 24 months, you're going to be able to refinance that at a much lower rate. If you paid $100,000 too much, you can't renegotiate that deal in 12 months. You can't go back to the seller. Oh, crap, I overpaid. I need you to rewrite this contract. So, it's like the market's not going to give us both. We're not going to get all the terms we want and an amenable seller and a 4% rate. You're going to have to take what the market will give you, and then you can renegotiate your rate later. So you're so spot on. I couldn't agree with you more.
I love it.
A couple other things I just mentioned, because you talked a little bit about when you were going to buy your first house, you were bartending and, stated income world, right? This is back in before the Great Recession, I'm assuming. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
So a lot of times I'm hearing people say to me along this kind of same topic that this feels a lot like 2008. And I just want to point out a few of the differences. Number one, the loan that Casey talked about where she could, her income was whatever it needed to be, that doesn't exist. That loan is illegal now. If you're going to live in a home, you have to prove an ability to repay. There's credit requirements, there's down payment requirements. If you're buying an investment property, Casey alluded to a DSCR loan. That's a debt service coverage ratio. So even if you're not going to prove personal income, you have to prove what the property would yield, and then they will lend off of an income, a certain amount of loan amount that is covered by the payment of the rental property. So the plumbing of the loan system is completely different now. Also in 2008, going into the Great Recession, there was between 3.8 and 4 million homes for sale nationally across the United States. Today, as of Friday of last week, the National Association of Realtors has 970,000 homes for sale. But get this, 30% of them are under contract, meaning a buyer's written an offer, a seller's accepted, and they're going through their transaction. So really, there's only about 650,000 homes for sale. Compare that to the 4 million that were for sale in the Great Recession. So we've seen a little bit of a pullback in terms of demand because of the interest rates and people being scared off by Crisis News Network. But the reality is the plumbing from the lending side and the supply side is completely, could not be any different in 2023 than it was in 2008.
I know it's different. It's not the same. I mean, the reason why all all the foreclosures back then was because people couldn't really afford the homes in the first place.
Totally.
Now people since then, lending has tightened up. It's got a little loose lately, but it's tightened up. And now you have to qualify. You have to put a good chunk of money into it. You have to prove you can make the payments. And the economy's been pretty decent, for a while. So anyone that's bought their house in the past 10 years has got a lot of equity in their home. And even if they lose their jobs in this recession, I got to feel they're going to do whatever they freaking can do to save their house.
Yep.
Before, if you only put 3% down and couldn't even afford it in the first place, you'll let the 3% go if it drops in value half, because you don't really have much invested in it anyway. And it's going to be too difficult to work that second job or go get a new job to make that huge payment when your house isn't even worth it. They were willing to just let go of that before. But now people have a lot of equity in their homes. They had to put some chunk down anyway. And they're not really just going to want to go foreclose. So I don't personally even see some slew of foreclosures happening. I don't see it. And if we do see anything, it's going to be from regret from the past year and a half. And we maybe will see that down the road. Some foreclosures from people that bought at the height. Maybe, I even wonder too about people that bought for flips and they don't make the good rentals, and they got to pay back their hard money lender. I mean, money was so easy. Making money in real estate was so easy since COVID, that people could just I want to flip. And then, oh, oops, I overdid my rehab. It's okay. Let me just wait 3 more weeks. Right. And then, you can't do that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the other thing that was coming up for me, in terms of the loans back then, all those loans were 2-year fixed or 3-year fixed with teaser interest rates that shot up sky high. And many of them had negative amortization. So let's say the teaser rate, you started at 4%, you're only making a payment at 1.99, and then that rate popped up to 6 or 7, and your teaser rate went away. So you basically went from making a 1.9% interest rate payment to a 6 or 7%. And then people were like, oh my gosh, I couldn't afford this house in the first place. Now the values have come down. My rate's gone to 7%, but that's totally different now. The numbers that I last saw was something along the lines, and correct me if you have something more updated, but about 1/3 of the homes in the United States are owned free and clear, no mortgage. Of the homes that have mortgage, something like 66% of them have a fixed rate, 30-year or 15, with an interest rate below 4%. Where's the risk in that? I mean, almost anybody with a 3.5% mortgage could rent it out for cash flow.
And nobody's going to move. That's the problem that we're going to start having is even worse supply moving forward, because nobody in their right mind is going to leave their 3% interest rate house for a 6% interest rate house or a 5% interest rate house when the prices have gone up. Nobody's going to do that.
Now let's talk about that. Yeah, let's talk about that for a little bit, because people have a hard time in general bifurcating between good debt and bad debt. And they lump it together and say, debt is evil, we need to pay it all off. And what you just alluded to, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but what I'm reading into what you just said was, hey, if you have a 3% 30-year fixed mortgage rate, you're not looking at that as a liability. That's a freaking asset. But tell me if you agree with that and how you think about that.
I definitely agree with that. And I think that with buyers who are looking to move up, now likely an investor is not going to want to sell that property. Right. And they're not going to be paying that one off either.
Right.
Because, inflation is more than that. So that's free money.
Yep.
But the people that are looking to sell and move up, those are the people that are going to need more incentive to want to move, because their interest rate that they have is an asset. Matter of fact, so we live in Memphis. We're not super fans of it for living here. And we're like, maybe we should move to Nashville, soon. So, and I was talking to my realtor last night in Nashville, and I was like, look, I know what kind of house I want and how much that's going to cost me. I don't really want to pay interest. That is today's interest rate. and 5.875 for over jumbo loan. Maybe I said we can find some FHA loans, I can assume, or somebody who's got a lower interest rate that I can buy their house and work a deal. So like people that have the lower interest rate, that's something that, man, you could sell that.
Yeah.
You could do a seller financing deal. You could do creative financing and make money, keep the property and sell that to, get a higher interest rate from somebody else and keep your rate. The low interest rate, especially it being below, the inflation rate is you're making money having that loan. It's free. It's essentially free money that you're borrowing. Yep. So you would be a fool to lose that,
Have you ever run into a guy or watched any of the YouTube videos from Jason Hartman?
No.
I'm going to send you a podcast that I did with him. He came up with this concept, Casey, that blew my mind. Like I conceptually could understand that just because I've been I told you my mom and I bought our first apartment building, 8-unit apartment building 22 years ago. So when you got a 22-year runway, you can see that rents go like this and your mortgage goes like this. And then every 5 to 7 years, you have a chance to refinance. Then your mortgage goes down. Then your mortgage goes down. So the delta between where your mortgage payment is and your rent, I could just, feel it. It was huge over a long period of time. But Jason named this phenomenon, and what he called it is inflation-induced debt destruction. It's a mouthful, but we could just change it to inflation debt destruction. And basically what he's saying is, like, for example, when I bought that 8-plex, the average rents on the property were $275 to $315 a month. Now they're $1,500 a month, right? So it's gone up 5x. So inflation pushed up my rents, which is if you think of it from a lending perspective, if you're calculating the debt to income ratio or the debt service coverage ratio on that property, the debt to income proportion is going down. The debt is being deflated in value because the rents are going up. So I'll send you that podcast. He's incredibly bright. He's a good dude.
You know what? I shouldn't probably say this, but whatever.
Nobody's watching.
We were just, no one's watching, COVID just happened. Well, what did that do to the US debt?
For sure.
With inflation.
100%.
It reduced the debts that we owe China.
Yep. And the tax haul for 2022 is the largest tax haul of all time. And you're exactly right. I mean, think about it. They dropped $6 trillion in financial stimulus while all the supply chains were locked down. Come on. How did you not know that was going to create some inflation? And if you're the largest debtor in the world, who does it benefit the most? Connect the dots. I couldn't agree with you more. All right, before we get in trouble, let's change the.
Next subject.
All right, so you have this cool diagram on your website, and I'm just going to pull it up if that's okay. And I'd like you just to kind of walk through this. And before you do, also team Casey's website, brickbybrickwealth.com, and then in her success heading, I love this. You don't need to be rich to get rich. And I really want to talk about that a little bit, but would you walk us through this diagram and what you mean by you don't need to be rich to get rich?
So many gurus out there preach, get rich tomorrow. Here's my unicorn story. You can be that too. I'm such a realist and sometimes a negative Nancy that I just shake my head. So being wealthy, unless you come from old money, it takes work, it takes sacrifice, and you're not going to get there tomorrow. And a lot of people never take the first step because it's not immediate gratification. So, and I know that, and I am so freaking determined that I will do whatever I need to do to get to where I want to be. I go through my ups and downs. I get depressed and, frustrated just like anybody else. But when I'm out of that, I take a nice bath like I did last night and I'm back in the game, So you don't need to be rich to get rich. You don't. You can start from nothing. And the best thing that I love about real estate, investing in, long-term rental properties, especially, The other ones are a bit more risky for me. But what I love about long-term rentals is that just buying one of them at a time. Does it take some time? Yes, to get rich, to feel it. But you get money now, right? To get your nails done, and you get some cash flow every month to buy a nice dinner or save it, whatever. But then also while you're asleep at night, while you're sleeping, your property is growing and you wake up 10 years later and it's worth double. Now, have multiple of those properties, go to sleep, wake up in 10 years. Now you have your net worth that you didn't have to work for, right? A lot of people, it's hard. You have $100,000 a year job or a $70,000 a year job. That's the max you can make because that's as good as you are, right? Unless you want to go start your own deal. You want to go start an entrepreneurial gig, and man, that's not for everybody. Okay, I know. So you can do that to make unlimited income, or you can still work for your employer, not be so stressed out with life, and stop saving your money in the bank account because it gives you 3 cents, right? Every month. And one of my IRAs that I opened when I was like 18, there's a couple $1,000s in there, and I get 3 cents a month. It's like, I know I got to roll it over, but it's just like saving money isn't going to help you. You need your money to make money for you. And that's how people get rich. You aren't going to get rich by saving. You're just not. Right. So I had this diagram. My husband actually made this for me. And he made it for me to show me, look, Casey, if we have just 10 rental properties, now it may take us a year, 2 years to save for the next one. But every time we buy another property, it's saving money for us faster. The pot is filling quicker. And before you know it, every 3 months, we can buy a new house. Our rental properties will save money for us. We will no longer have to save money from our paychecks. Our rental property machine will be running smoothly. It will pay for itself, and we'll be able to buy we'll have enough for a new down payment every 3 months. That's the goal. And that's what this kind of shows. House number 1, you start off with, let's say it was $100,000 house or whatever. You put 20% down. I know now it's 25% down, but this is easy math here because, English was my thing, not math. So he's like, let me draw some pictures for you, Casey. Thanks. Thank you. And it's so good. I go put that for my website because it looks great. It's a really good explainer. So you buy one house for $100,000. You put $20,000 down, right? You make $1,000 a month in income. And, obviously if you want to keep the whole 1,000, you're going to need to pay it off, the house, but you can save $1,000, and every 20 months you can, in 20 months, you'll have enough for another down payment, right? By just saving from that one house. Now you have 2 houses. Now it only takes you 14 months to save for a down payment. Now you have 3 houses. Now it only takes 10 months to save for another down payment, and so forth. By the time you get to 10 houses, you're able to save for a new $20,000 down payment every 3 months. That's the power of real estate, just one at a time, letting your real estate, your rental properties make money and save for you. It's a bank account. It's the best kind.
This is, maybe one of the best illustrations I've seen because investing in real estate, if you do it right and you leave the money in the pot, as I like to call it, meaning that it's building for capital improvements on the property, or it's building for your next acquisition. It's a similar philosophy to reinvesting your dividends if you own stocks and they pay dividends. It's hard to imagine, or let's go with a Steve Jobs acronym, right? When Steve Jobs gave his famous Stanford graduation speech, he said, it's impossible to connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking backwards. And as I look back over 22 years of investing with my wife and my mom, I realized that the investment at a certain point becomes an exponential growth. In other words, it's not just that I'm adding one more rental property this year, like I did the first year. It's that I'm adding 4 more rental properties this year. And that's what this shows, right? This took you a year and a half of Etsy savings. That was one property. Then you quit Etsy and did this full time and started the coaching. And then this speed accelerates. And this is what I mean by exponential. Now, instead of her buying a home once every 2 years, she's buying a home once every 3 years. And if we fast forward 10 or 20 years down the road for Casey and she connects the dots backwards, my guess at some point this ends up, she buys a shopping center, she buys a huge building. Like, it just gets bigger and bigger. But looking forward to connect the dots is crazy hard. And you've done that with this illustration. And I just love it. So great job on that.
Thanks. Yeah, it definitely lays it out. It just shows you that, you just need to start with one. And a lot of people, starting with one is the hardest. The first step is the hardest. You're out of your comfort zone. You're doing something you haven't done before. You maybe have little to no real estate experience. And it's such like a big risk, right? A lot of people save up so much money. So to potentially lose $30,000 to $50,000, which is what you kind of need to be all in for a cash flowing rental, in my experience, to maybe lose that. And that's like all you have. It's like, no, my fight or flight says, fly away. That's too scary. So that's why I have my coaching program, to help people get out of that. And, you can see that once you get your first one down successfully and you know how to do it, it's like, oh my God, the veil is lifted. You see the light at the end of the tunnel. You can see now how you can scale, how you can make more money, and how really bringing it back to family, you can take the pressure off your husband. I never wanted to work. Who doesn't, but I never wanted to get a real job, a 9 to 5. My husband does the 9 to 5. And I wanted to make money otherwise. I want to be an entrepreneur like my dad. I wanted to be an investor and do things like that, but I wanted to stay at home. But that income is so, the entrepreneurial income is so up and down, right? But real estate income is so steady and it's so dependable. And it's like, now my husband could quit if he wants to. He could give the middle finger to his boss and say, see you later. It's just a weight lifted, that he doesn't feel the pressure to have to provide financially.
You hit on something about, your dad left this impression on you. And I think you have three young children, boys, girls?
2 boys and a girl.
2 boys and a girl. Okay. And so talk just a little bit, if you would, about, I've been thinking a lot about this recently, about how you are bringing them into the business and what lessons you're trying to teach them through, because I'm sure you're trying to pass on this passion the same way it was passed on to you. What does that look like?
Yeah. So it's a fine line. It's difficult because I want to instill in them the belief that money is abundant, because I'm into the spiritual stuff.
Love it.
Money is abundant, and money doesn't always come from hard work, right? It comes from making smart decisions. Mm-hmm. And so I want them to feel like we can buy or have whatever we want. At the same point, I don't want them to be spoiled in thinking we can just spend whatever we want.
Right.
That's not the same thing. Last night I was talking to my daughter, Juliet. She's my oldest, she's 11. And I was like telling her what it would be like if we moved and how much it would cost if we bought a $1 million house, for example, that the payment would be over $7,000 a month. She's like, oh, that's not that much. She doesn't get it, and I'm like, well, for some people, it's not a lot, for like my sister, she's a very wealthy, I think, and she's younger than me. She's an amazing entrepreneur, come from the family, and she rents her house. She still rents, and it's like a little bit under $5,000 a month in California. It's like, you think $7,000 is a lot to buy $1 million house. People are renting like 3 ones for $5,000. Like,
no tax deduction.
Money is relative. But so I try to instill in them, like, the one thing I'm trying to teach them, because they're all, 11, 9, and 5 years old. What I'm really trying to teach them is, don't spend your money. I mean, trying to keep it back to the basics. They're tiny kids, right? Don't spend your money. How can the money that you have work for you? So my daughter has made money babysitting my neighbor's cat for the most part. That's where she makes her. My neighbor has a lot of vacations. So but watches the cat. She's got, with birthday money and Christmas, probably $500 some she's got. And Juliet's like, I want to go buy an American Girl doll. I was like, okay, you can buy an American Girl doll, or you can buy some like materials and tools to help you create something to sell to somebody else, so you can make more money. And then now you can buy 2 American Girl dolls. What? Yes. Don't spend the money you have on liabilities or depreciating things that are stuff.
Yep.
Spend your money creating building some sort of business or building something that can make you money. And so now she's working on wanting to start with Blake, a barbecue spice company and spice rubs. And, she's going to market it and sell it. And I was like, Julia, you could definitely make $1,000 a month selling locally Memphis rubs. And, for Father's Day, we can sell it on my Etsy. I have a good Etsy shop, still open. I just don't sell anything. So it's like, got her thinking, about how you can have your money make money for you, but you have to do something with it, or you can just go spend it and then it's gone. Yep. Now my son, he's 9. He just wants to buy Fortnite V-Bucks. He's not quite there yet.
Give him another couple years.
Yeah.
I think that one of the greatest things about this business, about the real estate business, is bringing kids into it. And that moment you just described where you were explaining that to your daughter and she's like, what? Right? Like you got her to shift her perspective and see something totally different. I've been doing a lot of thinking around, what's my definition of inheritance and what's important about inheritance. And for me, I had a mentor that taught me and said, the money isn't the thing. The properties, the houses, that's not the thing. The thing is the lessons that they learn so that they can either keep that going or they can start something new, but they need the lessons. They don't need the money. And so I've been really trying to think through how do I make it fun? How do we bring them and indoctrinate them into this entrepreneurial spirit, which inherently takes risk. So my wife and I bamboozled my son out of his $3,000 in savings to invest in a property last year. And, we dropped the limited partnership documents, mom's name, grandma's name, dad's name, Xander Mettle, right? And now every quarter he gets a quarterly distribution, and then he gets to make a choice. You can spend it, or if you want to resave that money into your investment savings account, then we'll double the balance. If you decide to, whatever that deposit amount, we'll double it. So the kid is just like hooked now, right? I mean,
how old is he?
He's the 13.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. He's 3 years till a car, Casey. So now we started talking to him. We was like, okay, now how do I get my money back out of that building? Because I just see bricks. And so we started talking about, when you become 16, you're going to have to make a decision. Do you want to sell your ownership shares, or do you want to use the cash flow from your investments to pay for the car loan so your investments continue to grow, and then I'll co-sign? So it's like, so fun, man. It's just so cool to show them and to get them to grapple and think about their own personal finances and investments at 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. It's really exciting.
And I really think that it's so important that everybody who's listening really, really pays attention to this, because back in the day, before I was born, even back in the day, there was usually like a single income household, and you would pay for your gas and your home, which was affordable, and you would, maybe, and that's it, right? Do a couple little things. Now we have TV, cable, cell phone bills, exorbitant prices for everything. Labor is not proportional to what it should actually cost to do things nowadays, and like compared to everybody's income.
Sure.
We have to pay for so many more things now in today's day, and it's going to get worse. Yeah. And no longer can we rely on a job unless you have some really high paying job. You can't rely on that to carry you through like you used to be able to in the old days, like my parents were taught. We can just, our parents were taught by my grandparents to save your money, and that's good enough. Yep. Save it. Back then when rates were high, you could get a 10%, we're in school, elementary school, they would teach us. I remember the freaking spreadsheet. Look at 10% compound interest. And growing up, I thought, 10% interest. No, guess what my interest is in my bank? 0.04%.
Right.
That's really far from 10%. So what do we have to do nowadays? And what do we have to teach our kids to do? To not rely on a day job or even have one at all. But it's definitely good to build the skills for, working with people or whatnot. But to be able to have the skills and the know-how and the knowledge that, hey, I'm going to have multiple streams of income to survive. It's a survival thing.
Yep.
We have to make more money unless you have a high paying job, right? A regular old job isn't going to cut it. You're going to be working till the day you die. I remember I read something somewhere that said that once people retire, their average lifespan is 18 months, right? Yeah. So if you'd like to maybe not work until you're in your late 60s, maybe you should have another stream of income or have saved your money, have your money growing somewhere else to help you, because your income isn't going to be enough, and it's really not going to be enough for your kids when they start working. I don't know, just my thoughts.
I think you're spot on. Yeah, I mean, I talk to Xander all the time, and I say, look, we got to think about what is technology going to automate and take away from us. And I said, here's a couple of things that I think technology will never take away. It's never going to take away the physical real estate and space that people need to live in. You can't automate leadership, and you're always going to need someone who is a good salesperson who can educate and help people and help them make really good decisions. But the rest, a lot of the other stuff can all be automated. Like I was reading something in China that their birth rate for the first time in 60 years is starting to go down, and their response is they're just creating millions of robots. And I'm like, that's the future, right? And so we've got to figure out what are the professions that are still going to survive that, where we can be entrepreneurial, we can be in a more favorable tax bracket, and we can survive that kind of automation that's going to happen. All right, Casey, last question. Well, second to last question. I have a friend that I went to lunch with last week. He is a successful young man, but he's never really gotten into investing. He was telling me that he has a 3% mortgage on the home that he owns. He has over I think he had like $475,000 in equity in that home. And his thinking was, hey, I'm going to sell that. I could pay the commissions and whatnot with the $75,000. I'll move $400,000 over to the new property. And I started to ask him, what's your payment on that house? What do you think it would rent for? And just back of the napkin, I'm guessing he'd have a $2,000 or $2,500 a month cash flow if he were to rent that property out. And as we kind of worked through those numbers a little bit, at the end, he said, I actually think you're right, but I'm afraid. And I think that holds a lot of people back. So do you have any coaching or leadership that you can give us around how do you get through that fear to make a brave decision to be an investor and entrepreneur?
I think, for your friend, the one thing I would say is, well, is he wanting to move? Because I can talk to people all day long, but if they don't want to live where they are and they want to buy their own house first, I mean, it's really hard to change people's minds on that.
Sure.
So if you want to move, you can just bite the bullet, right? Because you're not going to be happy. But if you're happy where you are and you have equity in your home and you're like, maybe I can buy some investments with that. And maybe you live in a high cost area and those don't make sense near you to buy rentals and you have to look out of state. People do it all day, every day, successfully. You just need help, And for someone that has a lot of equity in your home, as a matter of fact, I would say probably 40% of my students get their down payment from their home equity lines of credit.
Yeah, interesting.
That or they borrow from their 401k or they have cash. But a lot of people have loans, have gotten borrowed from their 401k.
Yeah.
So I would say definitely do that. If you have some cash, but maybe you don't have a lot of cash, maybe you've only got like $50,000 to your name in the bank account and you don't want to spend all of it. So share some of the burden with your with your equity line, maybe even say, okay, I feel comfortable using $20,000 of my own cash. And maybe I can just take 30 from the HELOC. Mm-hmm. You can put them together and put a down payment. But for those of you who are scared to buy your first rental property, but you have equity, you need to, first of all, you need to figure out what type of investment you want to do. There are so many different paths in real estate. You can do long-term rentals, short-term rentals, mid-term rentals. You could flip, you could do wholesaling, you could invest in syndications if you have money, you could do REITs. Like there's a lot of things. So what type of investor do you want to be? How much time do you have? How much cash do you have? What's your savings rate? What are your goals? What's your risk level? You got to get that answer first to decide what type of strategy do I want to use. And then if it's long-term rentals, or maybe even short-term, but if it's long-term rentals like it is for me, you have to go find someone who can help you out of state, because there's a lot of ways to lose money with real estate. First one is buying in an area that's going to cause you a lot of problems, not putting in the right tenants. And getting into areas and tenant relationships where they completely trash your property, and a turnover will cost you $10,000 and there goes your money, or underestimating rehab costs, buying a property with big problems that cost you money right out of the gate, or underestimating or overestimating rather how much it's going to rent for, and you are way off. So there's a lot of ways you can really botch your first investment. And my advice is to get a base hit, a solid, strong, performing rental property for your first one. Are you looking to get one $40,000 under asking and it's a deal of a lifetime? If you are waiting for that, you are going to be waiting for that forever. There is so much to learn with your first rental property. Understand how to do it first. Get through everything, the whole process, build your team of people. And then now you can take more risks if you want to go wait for those deals. But having that foundation and knowing what market you're going to be in, and having, get someone to help you do all of that to land a solid deal, the first one, that's what you should be focusing on. Then you can spread your wings and buy more and more properties, because you'll have the confidence afterwards once you've done the first one.
Oh, I love that. That's exactly right. You need an education, you need a foundation, you should have a plan, and then you have to take a risk. And then once you're in the game, the education really begins, and it speeds up exponentially. So Casey, that was beautiful. That was a great way to end this podcast.
Nothing like hands-on.
Amen. That's it. That's exactly right. So I know people are going to want to follow you and are going to want to learn more from you. What is the best place for people to find you, Casey?
So I am on Instagram every single day, and that's at Brick by Brick Wealth. You can also visit me on my website, brickbybrickwealth.com. That's like a tongue twister. And then I am fine if you guys want to email me. I give my email out plenty of times. I don't get spammed. So it's Casey at brickbybrickwealth.com. I have my email open on my computer or my phone all day long. And so I am happy to help you. And if you are scared to email me, you can DM me on Instagram. I'm starting my YouTube channel back up. So no new videos yet. They're all really old if you saw any of those. But I'll be there as well with content.
Awesome. Well, Casey, thanks for sharing so abundantly. I really enjoyed this conversation. I know people learned a lot, and we look forward to connecting with you again sometime in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks, Casey.